Hello, I'm Riley, and this is the Diegetic Advancement Podcast. Hello and welcome. Today I'm going to be responding to a round of call-ins that my last episode generated. It does feel good when an episode generates a bunch of call-ins. I'm never sure exactly what that means. Did I strike gold and continue? Should I continue with the ideas from that episode, or should I just leave it be? And that's explored and it's generated the call-ins that it will. Either way, this podcast is not really well planned enough for me to talk about anything other than whatever I end up thinking about on a particular week. So I really appreciate everyone listening, and especially those that do call in. And today we're going to hear from John of the Red Dice Diaries, Jason from the Nerds RPG Variety Cast, Mirke from the Mirke the Meek podcast, and two first-time callers, Spencer from the Keep Off the Borderlands podcast, and James Knight, who I had the pleasure of meeting and chatting with about a week ago. Hopefully you hear that on Mirke's podcast soon. Okay, enough of all that. Let's take it away, James.
Hey Riley, James Knight calling from London. Great to hang out with you and chat on that call with Mirke the other week. I look forward to hopefully interacting with you a bit more as a result. I was just quickly calling regarding your last episode, and as you began talking about initiative, the thing I immediately started thinking about was Troika, and you moved on to Troika. Interestingly, so I've not run Troika, but I have played it a few times with the same GM. And now, this was in the context of convention one-shots. So it's possible that the way the GM was playing the initiative was done in this way in order just to speed things up. But the way that she did it was that for the enemies, she just put in like one token. And when the token went, or when the token was pulled from the bag, all the enemies kind of went, and she just used a d6 to choose which PCs a given enemy was attacking. That obviously sped everything up, and it was only going back just now looking at the PDF that I realized that the rules they have a different system that involves the initiative value having an effect on how many enemy tokens are actually placed in the bag. So that was interesting. All I can say is that the system that I experienced as a player worked pretty well in that it worked pretty fast. Now, the thing that so I was cool with that. But the thing that I've never been entirely convinced by is the random ending of the round based on the end of round token that is placed in the bag. Now, as I said, I went back to the PDF because I got a PDF copy of the rules. I do have the book as well somewhere, but a lot of my stuff's in storage, so I couldn't do the book out. But anyway, I read the PDF, and there is actually I think it's the third printing PDF I have, there is 5.6 on section 5 initiative is the rationale for the random turn length. So I'll just quickly read. It says, the random turn length adds a degree of uncertainty where you never know how much time you have left. When actions are not taking place, it represents hesitation, panic, or other incidental delays that can happen in a tense encounter where every second counts. The goblins have few tokens because they are cowardly, not because they are slow. And yeah, I don't know. I just remember coming out of those games and thinking it just seemed a little bit arbitrary how the round could end after one player character or one enemy had gone, and you do obviously swiftly move on to the next round, so it's not that big a deal, and it does kind of spice things up a bit. But maybe it's the gamist in me, I guess. It just feels like you're being shortchanged slightly when you've been thinking and planning what you're going to do in a round, and then the round ends, and then because of the way that it's again randomly generated due to the way the initiative works, whatever you're planning, you just got to constantly be coming up with new plans. But then the more I reflect on it, maybe it is interesting. I don't play the game that much, so maybe it's an interesting system. So I'm in two minds. I'm thinking out loud. But anyway, I remember coming out of the game as a player thinking that the end of round token was more of an issue for me than the way the enemy initiative was working. Anyway, that's it for now. Look forward to more episodes. Take care, Riley. James Knight from over in London, signing out. Bye.
Thank you very much for the call, James, and for listening, of course. Very much appreciated. It was great to chat with you and Mirke the other week. Really interesting, and hopefully we can do something similar again soon. Troika Initiative. Really interesting to hear how it plays out, of course, with a single token just for the enemies. Last week I mentioned that I thought running initiative this way might slow things down more than I would rather do. So it's interesting to hear that that DM's chosen that method for speed of play. The end of round token, yeah, I think it rubs me in a similar way. I feel like the back and forth of the random token draw is kind of simulating that ebb and flow and the chaotic nature of the battle already. And I feel like it would feel quite sudden and abrupt when that end of round token is drawn, and kind of hard to fit into the narrative. I do wonder if when that token is drawn, if you rephrased it from the round is over to the tokens get added back to the bag, rather than it's effectively the same thing, but if it's not the end of the round, maybe you don't feel cut off. Yeah, it's very interesting. Again, thank you very much for the call, James. Okay, and next up we have John from the Red Dice Diaries talking about Shadowdark.
Hey there, Riley. It's John here from the Red Dice Diaries. Thought I'd go a bit old school and send you a message from the website formerly known as Anchor. Got to say, I pretty much agree that treasure generation and encounter generation is a little bit lacking in Shadowdark. I think this is possibly due to them trying to strike that sort of 5th edition OSR mid-ground. There's certain things that I would expect to find in an OSR game, like a traditional OSR game, that just don't exist in Shadowdark. I know we've talked a bit about this in the open table game I'm running at the minute, things like Hirelings and stuff like that, which we've had to house roll, and that's not a big problem for me. I generally just use whatever seems right, or like I'll default to old school essentials or something like that, and that's absolutely fine. But I do wonder whether it's because they're trying to hit a mid-ground rather than go like completely old school. But hey, you never know, that's just my thought. Anyway, I very much enjoyed the episode, dude. Keep up the good work, and I'll catch you soon.
Hey John, thank you very much for the call. Appreciate listening, of course. Yeah, treasure and encounters. There's some good stuff in there, right? But it doesn't. I think my main issue is really that it doesn't kind of gel with the stocking techniques and whatnot that I'm sort of accustomed to in running a sort of OSR style game, and so there is that sort of clash with some of the more modern aspects of the game, as you mentioned, where I'm trying to run it more old school than sort of that mid ground. But as you mentioned, it's a fairly easy thing to change or create yourself. So not really a big issue, certainly not a deficiency of the game. Again, I've just finished my second session, or my first full session. I jumped into a dungeon, and players are starting to get stuck in, and so I'm starting to get a little bit more of a feel for how the initiative system works and the torch timers and sort of all the interesting quirks that Shadowdark brings to the sort of dungeon crawling formula, I guess. Thank you very much for the call. We're actually going to hear from John again right after this, but I have a call from John, Jason, Mirke, and Spencer, all kind of talking about the one roll system. And I think I will let them play out and come back in at the end to kind of talk about that all at once. So I'll let John take it away, but we will hear from everyone else all at once.
Hey there, Riley. John again. Heard your episode about one roll systems. If you're interested in an interesting system where you just roll one dice, you should check out the Mazes game. Effectively, that has 4 classes: the Paragon, Vanguard, Fighter, and Sentinel. And each of those classes is represented by different dice: D4, D6, D8, and D10. You only ever roll the dice that is your class type, and depending on what sort of action you're trying to do, you are trying to get a certain range of numbers. And those numbers, depending on the action, are slanted so that whatever dice roll is going to be associated, whatever class is associated with that particular action, their particular dice will have like the most chance of rolling that number more often. It's a bit difficult to explain, but it's quite an interesting system. You might want to give it a bit of a look. Anyway, take care, and I'll speak to you soon.
Hey, Riley, Jason here. Just listened to episode 29, and your one role character, it's not the same as Lasers and Feelings and the spin-offs of that, but it's similar in the idea that you have, one good stat, one bad stat. Now, obviously, you have that third attribute in your system because you're trying to do Troika, or Advanced Fighting Fantasy, which is really all Troika is Advanced Fighting Fantasy with a different setting. But, yeah, so, like I say, it takes back to Lasers and Feelings and all those games based on that to some degree. Sorry, driving home from work. I apologize for yawning, but no, that's interesting though. Your stat, the way to roll those up, and I can see that working in a game if you feel the need for balance, and I can understand if you don't like the idea of one character being substantially better than another due to dice. But thank you for putting out your episode. Thank you for all that you do, and I will talk to you soon.
Hey Riley, I liked your rolling for stats concept. And I like how you're putting it in the context of it's helping you choose your class or your role, ROLE. So that's cool. I'm not one to care about which method of stats we use when I'm creating characters typically. Like in 5e, I would be just as fine doing point buy or even standard array as I am to rolling stats. I do find that having some amount of randomness when I don't have a strong character concept helps me to like flesh out the character. Okay, high strength, therefore we're probably going to go with fighter. So you can accomplish that with that one roll, as you were saying, and I like that. So that's cool. Thanks for sharing that. I hope you continue to explore that, get some positive feedback, and do something more with it. And I also hope you had a good time with family, enjoying that as well.
Hey Riley, Spencer here. Long-time listener, first-time caller. I'm not sure why it's taken me so long to get around to giving you a call, but I'm a big fan of the show. I really like this one-role character creation idea that you're suggesting. I'm a big fan of both Into the Odd and Troika, and I know Into the Odd has that offset of if you've got poor stats, you start with better equipment. But I recently ran a session of Cairn using the playtest rules for 2nd edition, and the players decided to use the character generator on the Cairn website, and I have to say they rolled up 4 of the worst statted characters I think I'd ever seen, despite my suggestion that they might want to have a few more goes at it. We went with the characters they picked. Subsequently, with the first encounter, 2 of those characters, well, one was killed outright, one was incapacitated, and, they were lucky any of them got out alive. So I'm intrigued to see what can be achieved with this one role idea that you're suggesting. Take care.
Okay, thank you again, John, Jason, Mirke, and Spencer, and of course James from earlier. I really do appreciate the calls. Okay, so let's talk similar game systems first. John mentioned Mazes, which is, I agree, it's a really interesting game. I'd love to play a session of. It's a very interesting concept where the die size is determined by your class and the way the odds of certain types of actions interact. I think that's really elegant and well designed. As I said, I'd love to play it and see how it actually works at the table and how it feels. Jason mentioned Lasers and Feelings, which does have a similar result in that there aren't bad characters. You're just picking whether you're good at lasers, feelings, or average at both. Not a game I've played, but I can see it being pretty good for a quick one-shot scenario or quick pick-up games. In that game, you also get a role and a style, which can give your character a little bit more substance beyond just the 2 attributes. And Mirke alludes to that a little bit in his call, where attributes can sort of help you choose a class or a role, kind of define that for you, and the randomness can perhaps help build a character where you don't have a strong concept. And I'm fairly ambivalent to the method of character generation as well, and I'm very happy to play a character with average or bad stats, which I'll talk about in a moment further. Spencer, yeah, really great. I really like the Into the Odd character generation where you can roll bad stats, but you might start with great gear. That is a very similar design that I'm kind of was aiming for in that one roll thing, where a bad stat really forces you to get some other perk rather than it just being a purely negative, which does make me think of Pendragon. Maybe I need to take a look at that. I believe you've got virtues in Pendragon, and they're sort of there's two sides to each one, and so attributes are not you're bad at something or you're good at something. It's what we're in a spectrum of two sort of opposites. Are you? That's an interesting concept as well for attributes or similar mechanics. Okay, I think I hit the highlights of everyone's calls there. I wanted to spend the last little bit just talking about why the one roll system. Spencer recounts a story about rolling up some bad characters and them just not being able to really get through the adventure because of that. And Jason talks about discrepancies in character power and balances being potential reasons for why I'm doing it. And that's all three of those things are definitely a factor. I think it really comes down to, what are attributes actually good for, and does having the chance to roll really, really poorly or extremely well help with that? Or is the randomness helpful? Things like that. And I'm going to refer to attributes here, but you can think of that more broadly to include skills and traits and other things that affect the abilities or effectiveness of a character, I suppose. Over time, I think attributes have become more important to the effectiveness of a character, at least in D&D, and I believe as that importance goes up, the less you want the possibility of having poor attributes or large discrepancies between characters. And we can see that just by even looking at AD&D, where they change from 3d6 down the line to 46 drop the lowest, and then we start to get point buy systems and things like that. The opposite, however, is that attributes don't have a major effect, and so is there a point of even rolling them? Yeah, at the sort of complete opposite end of that spectrum. Okay, so let's assume that my premise is airtight and you agree with it. At one end of the spectrum, it's too dangerous to roll attributes because the odds of getting a character that's useless, or at least useless in comparison to some character that rolls really well, is too high. And then at the other end of the spectrum, there's no point in rolling because attributes don't do anything. Okay, obviously no games exist at either end of that spectrum, and that spectrum probably doesn't exist, but I've created it for the argument's sake anyway. So what should we do with attributes then? Should we get rid of them, and should we remove the randomness from that system? Well, no, I don't think so. And Mirke touches on it in his call. Yeah, attributes can help you choose a class or a role. They tell us about something about the character. They are potentially useful, or they could be useful. And the randomness helps you build a character out of nothing. When you don't have a strong concept, these dice rolls can help you imagine something that didn't exist before, kind of like random generation tables for creating an adventure or something like that. And as Spencer mentions, you can just get really bad characters, and that their fate is probably sealed at some point. If you're getting a lot of negatives, low hit points, you're not fated for a great destiny of adventuring. You're very likely to die, and if you don't, it's still going to be fairly miserable in some games. Now, the one roll system that I talked about last week was effectively a driving home from work thought. So there's not much purposeful design intent behind it, but minimizing useless characters or very bad characters, either from poor rolls or by comparison to characters which just outshine another character in all aspects, was definitely one thing. But also keeping the perks of that randomness, of helping it define a character, what they are good at, how they interact with the world, and how they can be played by the player, I think are all things that I wanted to keep. And I think it does an okay job of that. Now, really, I think it's probably a bit boring as a solution if you think that some of these things are a problem. And of course, they're not necessarily a problem. But perhaps I'll continue to think about it. I quite like the novelty of the maths, just rolling one dice and seeing how much character we can give something. If we could roll one dice and get those attributes, those 3 attributes, but perhaps some positive and negative personality traits, their starting equipment, their hit points, color of eyes they have. So I might continue to push this idea, but we'll see. We'll see if I have any more interesting thoughts on it. Okay, I'm going to leave it there. I did want to talk a little bit about some other sort of dice rolling mechanics, but I might leave that for next week given the time, and I'd love to shout out some content, but I guess that will also wait for next week, or perhaps we'll get a special midweek episode. I haven't done one of those for a while. Again, thank you so much for listening. A special thank you to my callers. If you've got any thoughts on what we've talked about today, either myself or the callers, please call in, and you'll hear those details in the outro. Thanks again, and bye for now. I'd love to hear your feedback. You can reach me via Spotify, SpeakPipe, Discord, or email. Those details, along with everything I've talked about today, are in the show notes. Thank you so much for listening. Bye for now.